Okay, setting up. All right, we are live on YouTube. So this is Thursday, September 5th, weekly developer meeting for Backup CMS. A lot of exciting news this week. Let's see. I'm going to post this link in Gitter. All right. New contributed projects. Since our last meeting, we now have a stable release of the simple LDAP module and the views iCal export module. So thank you to our contrib developers for continuing to move that along. We have one issue we should talk about for backupcms.org. And this is something that I think maybe you talked about last week, but it's about creating a weekly development or not weekly, but a development snapshot for contributed projects that is sort of the latest, most up-to-date version of things. Yes. Drupal.org does this. They give you a -dev release. We're looking for a similar solution for GitHub. It looks like Nate added a pretty extensive comment to the very bottom of that issue. This is issue number 664, about how we can use GitHub to attach a different asset. And every time there's a commit to a project, we could have it run that day or that night, create another release and attach it. And then we would just end up with a ton of releases on the GitHub side, where every project would get a release for essentially every day there was a commit. But I think that it's not going to be too terrible because we don't usually send people to the GitHub releases page. We usually pull that information into backupcms.org. And we could encourage people to download the latest dev release from there. The tricky part, I think, is that I would prefer to have, rather than having a node on backupcms.org for every one of those dev releases, it would be cool if we could do it like Drupal, where you only have like, it's always -dev and it just points to something different. And so if we could figure out how to get our site to do that so it's always pointing to the latest release, there is a way in GitHub you can use our API to get latest release. We just need to put that integration into our project GitHub module in order to have that feature.
Yeah, so if we implement it as Nate recommends, like uploading the versions as assets in the existing release, then it means that there's nothing created in b.org, which means that people won't see it in their UI as an available version. So if they have a, say, +1 dev version and then a +2 or a +3 comes out, they won't be notified. Whereas in Drupal, you were notified of new dev versions. But yeah, as an intermediate solution, it's not bad, but people will have to do a manual job. Ideally, what we would have is, so the use case is that people are eager to install like a fix for their site. So they might want to install a dev version and then wait until the next bug release or the next minor release comes out before they upgrade. So maybe they could subscribe to like a dev or beta channel, then install the latest dev, which includes the fix for them, and then just wait for the next release. And be able to do that via the admin UI would be ideal long term.
I think that sounds great.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of work as well. But yeah.
All right, so that's it for things we're doing on backupcms.org. We are, of course, continuing to work on things like updating documentation, information about contrib modules, how to get those ported, the Drupal 7, just general stuff like how to promote a preview release. But that's the one issue we want to call out for today's meeting. But let's move on to talking about Backup CMS itself, because there's a lot of very exciting news this week. Starting with bug fix release issues. So these are issues that we're hoping to get into the next release of Backdrop, the next bug fix release, which is 1.13.4. For starters, there are going to be follow-up issues to all of the new features that are going into 1.14, and we'll talk about some of those in a minute, but there is still a lot of work to be done on those, in addition to the two things that we want to call out as a priority for 113.4. The first one is this longstanding views is none of operator issue number 3685. This feature has been broken in views since we merged a security fix that was also in the Drupal project. So it was a security fix, it can't be reverted, but it did break this feature. Drupal has also committed some changes which do not fix this feature. We've also been struggling with coming up with ways to fix the feature. So it is a very complicated query setup that it just is really hard to wrap your head around. If anyone has a lot of experience with views and wants to help fix that problem in Drupal 7 or in Backdrop, we could use some help in that area. Also, the tests are really complicated because they're trying to test the feature, which is really complicated, which makes it really hard to make sure they're adequately testing the right thing, as has been proven by Drupal, where their tests pass, but the thing is still broken.
The issue number is 3614.
3614. And I think most recently there's a comment on there that Doc Wilmot had posted in Gitter about the use case that the current pull request doesn't work for, and that is having more than one is none of operator. And I know I've got a bunch of sites that are like is none of, and then is none of, trying to get like a very specific result set. And every time a new version of Backdrop comes out or a new version of views for Drupal 7, I have to go through and patch it, which is a big thing.
Do we have an export of like a minimal view that reproduces the problem?
So my Backdrop site that I keep applying that onto, the view is a Google map, which is really so I can post and export, but you're going to need like a bunch of different modules in order to recreate the same thing. What I might do for that site on the dev site is clone that view and make it not a map, just a list. And then that way it would be something that would be much easier for people to test. But yeah, that's a great idea. I'll try and link to a gist or something on there so we can.
Yeah, if we can get a minimal, all you need is like a view that is created with the default content types that come with Backdrop. And maybe get one use case where it works and then one with the multiple is one-offs when it doesn't work. Maybe that will help replicate the issue. And I'm not sure, maybe we should actually take the efforts in the d.org queue, or at least mention that it's not fixed for us either. And once it's fixed there, we can port the fix for us.
Do they have because I know that issue is closed. Do they have an open follow-up?
No, that's the problem. There was only one person that complained that it doesn't work for them. So if we jump in and say, hey guys, then maybe they will reopen it or create a follow-up.
Okay. All right. We also have issue number 3685. This is a meta issue of all of the views cross ports. So this is something that got us into a little trouble initially by merging a fix that went into views. But we're also now a bunch of commits behind what went into views for Drupal 7. And so this issue is to help get us back up to speed. And that way, as future changes go in, for example, maybe a fix to this issue, it'll be much easier to get them to apply cleanly to the Backdrop version.
Yeah.
I think where those are is that there's still a bunch of them that need reviewing. So if anyone is interested in reviewing pull requests, that might be something.
So we created like 9 meta issues, like we chunked the various commits so it could be manageable. So the first chunk, which is 3719, just has only one single issue, or sorry, pull request actually, and it has a couple of tests failing. I just need help to figure out why. So if anyone has more experience, they can give that a go and we can tick it off, as in that's the last remaining.
Okay.
Then the second chunk is, I'm sure that I filed pull requests for that. It just needs review. And then as soon as we get those moving, I can move on to actually creating the ports for the rest of them. Like I can move one or two things, one or two chunks at a time.
Okay. I can probably help you with that failing test.
Yep.
Take a look at it.
Thanks.
Sometimes I can't. I'll try. Okay, so if you're interested in fixing other bugs, we're of course always willing to take pull requests that fix any bug as long as it has a pull request that is marked ready to be committed. It will and can be merged for any bug fix release. but we just like to call out the ones that we think are particularly important. So 1.14.0, our minor release, will come out on September 15th. Feature freeze was initially September 1st, but because September 2nd was a holiday, we decided to push the feature freeze date to September 2nd, which was great. We got a whole bunch of extra work done over the long weekend. We also ended up taking 2 of the issues that were done at the very end of the release window and saying, hey, these are done, they look good, but we're a little nervous about merging them right now. And so we gave those issues another 24-hour extension. So those were fieldable files and allowing the hidden text formats they're currently labeled as disabled to be enabled again. So it was less misleading that they said disable and you couldn't enable them. And we spent a lot of time working on those 2 on the last day. Exciting news is that fieldable files has been merged. It is very similar to the implementation that's in file entity in Drupal 7. It contains an upgrade from file entity in Drupal 7. It also contains an upgrade from previous versions of Backdrop where you had files. So after 1.14, you should be exactly at the same place where fieldable files were in Drupal 7. That said, we do want to do some more work on that. In particular, the user interface for fieldable files is a little wonky. We made some changes to how that user interface works in Backdrop to simplify it a little bit. The biggest change is that you can only have one display mode for each file type. So if you have a file type that is video, you cannot have a display mode that is YouTube and a display mode that is an embedded video. You need to have a YouTube field and an embedded video field. Or there is also the possibility for a contributed module to add multiple display modes. So we left it so that you can, it's still like the API is still there that you can modify that if you want to. But the implementation was so complicated, we're like, is this really worth trying to put it in? So the upgrade path, what it does is it goes through all of the current display modes you might have and chooses the one with the lowest weight. So that would be the first one. It will use that as the default. And so if you want to get exactly the same functionalities you had in Drupal 7, you will need to create or clone the file types and just set different view modes for all of the different file type settings. We had a very brief discussion about that, I think, in the issue queue in Gitter, and very few people said that they used that feature, which is why we thought that it was safe to remove from port and allow in contrib.
Sorry, Jen, you mentioned about something about cloning the file type.
Yes.
But we have been discussing, I'm trying to find the issue now. The help text at some point where you create the file type and you choose the MIME or media types, it states that you shouldn't choose the same media type more than once.
I think there's also a comment saying that we're going to remove that.
So we're not going to enforce that anymore?
No, I mean, so it's never been enforced because on Drupal 7 sites, I know I always create lots of different types of documents depending on like what kind of, thing you're, what is this PDF? Is it a map? Is it an agenda? Is it whatever? And there's never been any restriction on it. So I'm not sure why that it says to do it that way. I think it might be because if you allow a document to match more than one, the second step is the selection, where you have to choose which type. We actually talked about reversing that so that file types work more like content types like they do in Drupal. And I'm not sure we have time to do this in the next 15 days, but it's something that we've discussed. Where when you go to add a file, it would say, what type of file do you want to add? You can click document, and then it'll use the MIME type as validation to make sure that you're uploading an allowed file type in the same way that when you upload an image, it uses the allowed image type. And that, I think, makes a little bit more sense to people who are already familiar with Backdrop's other types of things, rather than this file type where it kind of puts it backwards. And I know that the intent was to make it easier so that if you uploaded an image or a video or a file, it would know, oh, this is a PDF, I know what type it is. But I think that most people know when they're uploading a file what kind of file it is, and it's not too big a burden to ask users up front to choose one in the same way that they choose a content type. And I think that the simplicity that we get on the back end without having to do all this mumbo jumbo, test the file type, even mapping to MIME types it's a little complicated. And I think it would make the code much easier to maintain if we got rid of that. So that was an idea that Nate had, I think, at the end of the day, on the last day or the second to last day before the merge. And we're like, there's no way we're going to rewrite this whole thing right now. But it would be a fun experiment to do now that it's in, to see if it's a possible change to get in before 1.14 is released.
The thing is that it's not that people don't know what files they're uploading. It was that the bit that would now they have to do manually, like select what type it is. The CMS was actually doing it automatically for them, saying so it wouldn't introduce another step.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that makes sense when the type of files you're uploading is like either an image or a document. But if you have a more complicated setup where you have 8 types of PDF, it doesn't provide any assistance at all, because you just say upload a file and then it's like which type of document. So I don't know. I mean, it might also be something that we could like count the number of file types. I don't know. Any kind of, that's also increasing complexity if you now add both of them.
Yeah. And the way that it is now that you only can have one display type for each file type. If you want to add more displays, it means that you need to add another
file type
instead
or a contrib module that doesn't exist yet that would allow you to adapt. Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Okay, well, it's all open for discussion. What's in there now is exactly what's in Drupal 7, and it's very likely that that will be what is in 1.14. But now we have 2 weeks to play with stuff and see, like, we could try it and be like, oh, that's a terrible idea. But, you know, at least we have something that's working and will be familiar to people who are in Drupal 7. So I think anyone who has thoughts on this, we would love your feedback. Go ahead and find that issue in the queue. It is issue number 2632.
Yeah, and the follow-up for this, for deciding at least what we're going to do with the media types, because the UI is horrible, is 4014. So okay. 4014. BW Panda opened that one.
Great.
So this is whether to decide if we are going to disallow an already selected and in-use media type to be used for another file type. And while I was doing the research, I realized that the list of media types that we have according to the IANA.org thing is missing entries anyways. So the list is incomplete.
Okay. Well, that should be easy to update.
Yeah.
I think it's just a config file anyway. So
yep.
We could theoretically add their own if we wanted to add a UI for that. All right, let's move on from fieldable files. There's a gazillion things we could talk about there, but let's do it in the issue. Yep. Next, issue number 2568, trusted host patterns. Do you want to give us an update on that one?
Yeah, so the initial implementation was that we would only throw a notice. So Drupal implemented it in a way that it prevents the installer from running if the pattern does not match the host or it hasn't been set at all. And also throws a white page if the site tries to be, if you try to run the same site code base from a different host. So the way we started implementing that was to only throw a warning instead of an error in the status page, the site status page. And initially I didn't implement any way to enforce those patterns. But the final implementation that got in was that it doesn't prevent the installer from running, but it throws a warning. And also, instead of showing it the default browser page, which was something like too many redirects, like it was blocking the access to that page, it throws a meaningful error that, you know, there's a problem with the site, the pattern doesn't match the allowed hosts or something, which is more user-friendly. At least people know how to fix it. And the follow-up there is that maybe in the future we would allow, currently it's implemented as a settings.php setting thing, but maybe we would allow setting that via the user interface. But I'm not sure if it's a valid use case now. So the only use case that I can think of is that if you know that you're going to move the site to another host, you need to pre-configure the site so that it runs on that host without problems. That's the only use case that I can think of. Or if you plan to work on your local and you know what kind of host you're going to be using on your local.
Okay. Configurable layout templates. Do you want to do something on that one too?
Yep. So this is one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting feature that got in with 4.1.14. So so far, one can build a layout using either one of the layout templates that was provided by Core or any of the contrib ones that were out there. What we have done now is we added the ability to build your own templates via the admin user interface, adding as many rows and as many regions as you want, and being able to rename rows, regions, and set the number of regions per row. So yeah, and we call these templates flexible templates. So yeah, this is pretty exciting. I'm not sure if we have any follow-ups for that one. Maybe find out more. Yeah, there's no actual follow-up issue for it, but there's a task to automatically generate the icons for the templates according to what the user selected. It's straightforward, but it just needs work.
So how are we generating icons? Are we using an external service for that, or?
No, the same way that we generate the previews for the image styles thing.
So the GD image library can handle creating new images? Huh.
Yeah. So it counts the rows, and then it counts for each row with how many regions they are and how they are split by percentage, and then it generates just lines that respond to those. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah, so each time that you update or save a new flexible template, it would run the function that generates that image and update the image.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's one of the follow-ups. I'm looking at the rest of the follow-ups.
I think there's a bunch that were nice to have, like the ability to edit one of the existing, like a layout that was using an existing template, and it would sort of start with a clone of what you already had, and then you could add stuff to it. But I don't know that, I mean, that's a pretty complicated feature that might have to wait. Not like a follow-up bug fix issue, but like maybe in the next backdrop release. But there's a whole bunch of people are having great ideas about stuff that you can do now that we have this.
So there's one about adding a search filter in case that it gets hectic with too many layout templates to choose from.
Yeah.
And then that thing that you mentioned is finding a way to make even the ones that are called standard, or I don't know, the templates that are locked somehow and you have to touch code otherwise, is that you would clone them, make them disappear, or replace them with that flexible clone. So long as that clone exists, it overrides the template that was previously used.
All we would need to do is add 10 like default sort of hidden templates, and then when someone hits like edit layout or whatever it is, it would like swap it and copy it in, and that would be a good starting point. But
yeah, my initial thought was that we shouldn't we shouldn't have to make the users know what a flexible template is versus the other one in the future, as in sort of like we know what happens in the back end, the behind the scenes, but in the user interface people wouldn't want to know. The moment that they click edit on one of the fixed ones, instead the non-flexible ones, we convert it to a flexible one, and that's it.
Yeah. We might have to do a little magic there because the markup's going to change. So we need to make sure all the classes that were generated from the old layout name get added to the new one too, so that things will match when they're done. But I think that would be really cool. I think you're right. Just as the same edit button, and you can either use a standard starting point or you can.
Yeah, and see how we have a column now that says flexible template or standard, whatever we call them. We have to get rid of that. Yeah.
That's fine. All right. Next up, dashboard block. Welcome to Backdrop. Do you want to give us an update on that one too?
Yeah, so at some point a few weeks back when we weren't sure that some of the exciting features were going to make it, some people complained that this is sort of like not going to be an exciting release. So Tim and I just started brainstorming if there were any low-hanging fruit features that we can get in. I started at the same point I was looking at how WordPress was doing things, but I can't remember which thing. But yeah, I saw the welcome block that they had, and I go, yeah, this is an easy thing to do. So we did something really quickly. That got in, so we now have a welcome to Backdrop block, which has some links in 3 sections, starting from the least advanced ones, like for novice users, and moving on to more advanced topics. So the set of links that we have for each section is not set yet. We have something that is 90% say what people want, but we have a couple of weeks ahead to decide if we need to move certain links to different sections or add other links or rename the existing ones or remove them. But yeah, it would be a good feature to sort of like introduce people into Backdrop, novice users especially. The follow-up to that is that we need certain features that are not available yet. The idea is to make this block dismissible per user. So once a user has seen those links there and they have no use for it, advanced users know how to remove it, but it would be great if it was per user, as in certain users might need those links and they might need to, because they're novices, they might need to get acquainted with the product. So if you remove the entire block, you remove it for everyone. And one of the ideas there was that if we can implement it, because this is a block, if someone clicks the dismiss button, maybe a visibility rule is added to that block for that specific user, which makes it hidden for him, but not for the rest. But yeah.
It's like there's also a bug here for access checks.
Oh, Nate implemented those.
Okay. And then visual design related change for making sure that it looks good, even if people don't have all admin permissions. So
yeah, that's more generic. It's not specific to this block. It's just that when I visited the
dashboard.
Yeah, so when you visit the dashboard as a user that doesn't have the permission to view the admin theme, there's 2 problems there. First, it doesn't look great, but then when you give that permission to that user, certain blocks are shown there when they shouldn't. Like, for example, the block that shows how many available updates are there. The user doesn't have any permissions to view or act upon those, so it shouldn't be there.
I don't know. So I set up that one. I made that specifically appear because it could be that the developer doesn't log into the site every day, but the editors do. And the editors can be like, hey, there's an update. And that's still.
Yeah, now that we have, maybe that's right. But now that we have the editor role, maybe the editors can see it, but not all authenticated users.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what permissions were set, but I think there is a specific permission on that block. It's not that it didn't have any permission, but we should check now that we have the editor role, which is maybe on the list. We should do a lot of testing as that editor role and make sure that everything looks good, at least for that one. And that would be a pretty good gauge of, if we get it right.
And the editor role is the next thing that we were going to talk about. There you go.
You want to give us an update on that one too?
Okay, so see how I said that Tim and I were thinking about low-hanging fruit. So this was Tim's low-hanging fruit. So he started, said it should be easy, and it was fairly easy, straightforward. He added a new role that is called editor. It has a few that is enabled by default for new installations of Backdrop. It has a few more permissions than the authenticated user, but less than the administrator. It's the ones that they make sense, as in being able to edit content. And I think there was discussions and follow-ups with regards to including more permissions, like being able to edit menus or taxonomy. So we still have another couple of weeks to decide for it. And yeah, this was something that is also decided to be done in Drupal 8. And they decided to go with the name content editor instead of editor, but it more or less is a basic, like the basic need behind it that drove the existence of it.
So I think that's great. I originally was against the idea of adding the editor role, but then I looked at all my sites and they all had an editor role, so I felt silly about it. So I'm glad that got in. And on all my sites, it is called editor, and there are people who have the job of editor, and having the role match up to the job, I think, is fine. If there are people who have jobs as content editors, then they can change the name on their site, just like you said.
There were a few cases of sites that I either helped build or built myself for like really small sites for friends or family. And once you hand the site over to the person, you don't want to give them full admin rights because they might break things, but you still need some more rights out of the box, so permissions. So yeah, this helps in that way. I think there was an even older request, or maybe that was the same, that was saying I wanted to add a role that was called site owner, as in it would reflect the actual thing that the owner of the site wants more permissions than the simple user that logs in, but less than the developer that built the site for them. That was the idea. Yeah. Simple things like being able to change the name or the slogan of their site, the favicon, the logo, things like that. That normally doesn't, these tasks do not fall in the same plate, like under the same category.
Yeah,
as the.
that's like administer. That's a huge permission though. Like if you get people to do that, they could totally break their site. So there might also need to be another issue that's like maybe separate out site logo from everything else on the back end. Yeah, I've never actually set up a new role for a site owner. Usually what I do is I give them an editor role, and then I also give them the credentials to user one and say, never use this. It's like in case of emergency only. And then that way, as the owner, they have the power to like fire me, right? Where they wouldn't need to ask me to fire myself, which is a little weird. And if they need to get in there and do something like that, they can, but they've also been warned, like, this is dangerous. If you log in with your editor every day, you'll be safe. This is like, you as the owner get this, you own this, but then, yeah, they don't usually change the site name anyway. They ask me to do it, even though they could do it themselves.
This is a discussion around how roles work and which roles are there inherently from Drupal. For example, in GovCMS, we have this thing where the SaaS customers do not have a lot of access, and each time that, say, a government agency changes their name after an election, and they want to rename the site, and they have to raise a ticket with us so we can log in and change the name for the site. This is ridiculous. Like, you can assign a specific person, like, I don't know, the minister or the shadow minister, to be able to log in and change the site name.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the use case behind that, and it doesn't have to be so high, I don't know, enterprise or government thing. It could be simpler, like.
Yeah, I think like separating that permission out would be something that's a good use case for core. I don't think another role for that is a good use case for core, but making it easy for people to make one should be.
Yeah, because it's really like that you have, like, for simple tasks like that, which are in certain cases are simple ones, you have to give them the permission that does everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next issue on here is signatures for packages, and I don't remember where we stand on this. This was one that Nate was going to give us an update on. I know the issue itself, issue 1992, got bumped to the next release, but I think that something got merged because I thought I saw a commit in there that was like a partial bit of it, and I don't know which part and why. So maybe let's leave that update for next week. Nate can talk about it when we start to talk about 115 issues.
That one has a lot of moving parts, like the project module as well, and bit.org as well. So yeah, Nate initially requested that we get some changes. We get those things into contrib modules so that they can be installed, not necessarily create releases for them, so that we don't have people installing them and using them. And then before they get merged into core, we install them in b.org and have them do whatever we need to do. like start generating what you call it, signing the packages, and then we can test things.
Okay, so that is all for 114. For 115, we have a few issues that got bumped. That signatures for projects was one of them. Another one is this text formats issue, which I think was something we tried to squeeze in there at the end, but we couldn't quite get it done in time. So this is, well, I don't know, Gregory, do you want to give us an update on this one?
Yeah, the 15775 issue.
Yes.
We tried to so the initial user experience issue, the problem was that we were telling people that we would disable the text format, but then the text format would completely vanish from the user interface. So when people disable things, they expect that they can be enabled, otherwise we just call it remove. So that was the initial UX issue that we were trying to solve. But then we said that we should retain the ability to do the thing that you're able to do now, which is remove it completely. Then we had some disagreements about that, as in what would remove do? Would it hide the text format from the listing, but still keep the configuration file around in case people wanted to recover, or completely remove it? So this was left for a follow-up. So yeah, the immediate UX issue was solved, but at the very last minute that we were trying to squeeze this in, we realized that there were some other issues with disabled format content that was using the disabled formats being able to be rendered or edited. So we needed to work on that a little bit more.
Yeah, there was a pretty serious API change in there where the function text formats load used to only load enabled formats, and now we changed it so that it would load disabled formats too. And that meant that the 22 places in core that were calling it and expecting only enabled formats were now getting disabled ones, and it was changing their behavior everywhere. So it was really late, and we decided we didn't really have time to fix that. But we do have ideas about how to mitigate that, like passing in an additional parameter to that function, setting the default value of what it's doing now, changing the places we need it to be differently. So I think there are plenty of solutions to that, but it was a big enough potentially security issue that we didn't want to rush a fix and get that one in.
Also, I think that there's no function that is called load. The function was called filter formats. The function that we actually changed. And
we changed the load function, and filter formats was the one that called the load function.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the reason we needed the load function is because the load function is the one that built the listing and the admin page. And okay. So we wanted it to pull all of the formats instead of just the enabled ones. So that was where we started. But yeah, filter formats calls the load function. And so, yeah, it became sort of an issue where we're like, if core calls filter formats, it's fine. We fixed that one, but we found there were 22 places where it called the load function directly. And so we could also change core by making it call filter formats instead.
Yeah. I realized that it either broke tests, or even if we fixed the tests, then it broke functionality when disabled formats should not be listed in whatever was calling the function.
Yeah, we were also shocked that all of our tests were passing, even though all of our disabled content was showing. So we're like, we definitely need tests for this. So yeah, it just became a bigger issue than we had time to fix.
Okay.
All right. So other stuff that didn't make it, and there was some stuff that got bumped earlier, the recent news block. I don't remember exactly why that got bumped.
Because there was the feed that was supposed to be pulled by the block was not created in b.org, so we didn't have time for it.
Okay.
So the initial blocker was not the initial. One of the previous blockers was that we didn't know what to call the API, the path thing, but we settled on that. There was another blocker that, so Nate thought that ideally we shouldn't include, like the JSON that was returned should not include things like node that are backdrop specific. So I'm not sure if that was sorted out, but yeah, that was that could have been one of the reasons that why it was banned.
Okay, that sounds
But
good.
the way that I see it, though, it hasn't. Maybe the milestone was removed because the only issue that I see in 115 currently is the one for the text formats. Oh no, I'm looking at just the bug reports. Maybe that's why. Sorry, my bad. So if I go to milestone.
So one thing we should mention is that it is the right time for people to advocate for issues that they want to see in 115. And then we will look at the list of issues that have advocates, run those by the project management committee and say, what are we missing that should be prioritized versus is there anything on here that shouldn't be prioritized? And so if you have issues that you want to see done for 115, you can volunteer to be an advocate. That doesn't mean you have to write the code. It just means that you have to check up on it and ping people who are working on it and make sure that progress is continuing to happen. And hopefully, if you can make this meeting, give us an update on how it's going. But I know, Gregory, you're going to get all excited because now you have a bunch you can go advocate for again. I got all excited yesterday, and I had a client request to have image cache tokens or image style tokens.
Yeah,
and so this is a module in Drupal 7 called image cache token that got into core for Drupal 8. And we need the same thing in Backdrop. And so I spent a little bit of time playing with the tokens from the Drupal 7 module, and I got it working in like an hour, which totally surprised me. I remember after 40 minutes, I had an appointment like at a specific time yesterday. And after 40 minutes, I'm like, what's the likelihood I'm going to get this done in 20 minutes? And then I was like, oh, wait, what else am I going to do in 20 minutes? Like, that's not enough time to start anything else. I'm like, I'll just keep working on it. And then I got it done 3 minutes before my appointment started. I was like, that's amazing. So I think that's just another indicator of like how similar the two systems are, where you can just take a Drupal 7 module and make it work for core for Backdrop. The only change I had to make is that the Drupal 7 module modified entities to add tokens to entities, but I wanted to modify like all of the entity types. So node, user, file, all of the like inner, like one step down more. And so it took me like 5 minutes to untangle that, and then half an hour to fix all of the bugs that came from untangling that. But yeah, I think it's working in the same way. My next step is to merge in all of the tests from the Drupal 7 module and make sure they all pass for Backdrop as well. So that's, I'm hoping nobody has seconded the effort for me to make that a milestone yet. But I wanted to put a vote out for it because I think it'll be a quick one, which is the opposite of what I had in the last release, which was a really hard one that Takuma did most of the work on anyway. And I want to get that in and then look. My focus is mostly on trying to get stuff that we had in Drupal 7 in Backdrop. So I think that's a good win in line with sort of my larger goals there. So
yeah. So as I said, BW Panda started poking like a lot of old, like around 1,000 something issues, and they all seem like trivial or small ones. These are UX issues. Like I didn't see any that was actually a new feature request. So maybe my focus for the next release would be to just, bring the views parity up to speed. And then since we are adding other modules like now file entity, keep that like updated. And I think there were other modules that we didn't keep track of, like the field modules, like email field, link. So we need to bring those up to date.
yeah. If you need any help generating,
I have the script now. Yeah.
You got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I also would love to get all of that stuff up to date. Maybe I can help you with that after I get done with this image cache tokens thing, which hopefully will be really soon. Then I can pick one of those modules. If you start on views, I could start on token or something, right? For example, and try and get it all up to date.
So the actual the actual porting is rarely a difficult task. It just needs some attention and time. Like it takes a lot of time, surprisingly a lot of time. Where it starts becoming tedious is the point where you need to start merging things because the future commits depend on those. So then the only thing is that finding people to just review, approve, and then get them merged.
Yeah.
But for those things, I think that unless it's a new feature, which rarely is, we should try to get them in with bug fix releases as soon as we can. Like not wait for the minor ones.
Yeah.
My constant fear is that even like initially before we get our heads around what's wrong with that is one-off issue with abuse, I was always saying that in the back of my head was like, maybe it's because we don't have parity. Because initially we thought that it was working for D7, but not for us. And I go, yeah, we don't have parity, that's why. But yeah, at least that will be a thing to rule out. So yeah.
All right. We don't have anything else on the list for 1.5, but as I said, it is time for people to advocate for things. And if anyone has anything else they think is a priority, we'll talk about next week or whenever those labels get added or someone wants to discuss it in the meeting. Moving on to general discussion items, it looks like Heroku hosted DragonBot is on here.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about that?
So we've been trying to fix our bot in the Gitter channel because for some people it wouldn't work, like it won't display help text or allow them to add karma or what have you, whereas it works for others. So Tim and David, they set up, they had a meeting about chatbots in general, like there was a local meetup, and then they tried to sort it out. They discovered that potential reason for it not working properly is that we have an outdated version of Node.js. So they set up a different bot. It started working for most people. We just had one person that, oh, there it is. Tim just mentioned something. Yeah, so they played around and they have a feeling that it might fix things. So we need to update the bot and Node.js. And then because it was discovered that the server that the bot currently runs on might not be doing anything else, and we started to sort of like move and deprecate those servers, maybe we use Heroku so we don't get any costs involved with running the bot. So where that issue is currently at is that David has requested access to the database that holds the current bot's karmas and stuff so that he can migrate it over to the Heroku one. Then we turn that one on and turn the old one off and maybe deprecate the server.
That's great. I'd love to get that.
Yeah, so we just need to figure out who has access to the old bot.
I think if you ping Justin Lars Designs in that issue, or even in Gitter, you might be able to get an answer pretty quickly about where the data is stored, if it's in Redis, and how to get access to it or get a dump or however that works. I know Nate's going to be out of town until Friday, and I know he has access to it, so I would recommend asking Justin first.
Yeah, it's been broken for a while, so it's not an urgent thing. But yeah, I'll ping Justin on Gitter and point him to the issue. Yep.
All right. I think that's it for today's meeting. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching live on YouTube, whoever's watching live on YouTube. And we'll go ahead and wrap up this meeting and get back to work and go fix all those bugs in backup.
Yeah. See you next week.
All right. Bye.